Coming up next, Sitting at 30 takes you downtown for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is made possible in part by TCI and is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
For a moment there, I thought Lloyd was going to threaten a $500 fine for missing City Club. In recent months, the City Club has had many programs on Oregon's future. We've heard from Governor Kitzhaber, Mayor Katz, Metro Executive Burton, Senator Smith, Representatives Wu, Blumenauer, and DeFazio. We've had an economic forecast. Next week we'll hear from County Chair Stein. And just last week we had a visionary look into Oregon's future with 4 middle-aged white guys from Portland. We've heard many important messages, but they've consistently been from a Portland, a state, or a national perspective. Today we'll hear 3 voices from beyond the Willamette Valley. Of course, I am just another middle-aged white guy from Portland, but I do get out of town fairly often. In the 16 years I've been doing statewide community development work, first with the Oregon Downtown Development Association and now with Livable Oregon, I've had the opportunity to visit every Oregon county and every city with more than 2,000 people. I feel like a regular at restaurants in La Grande, Baker City, Bend, Pendleton, Redmond, The Dalles, Astoria, Seaside, Newport, Florence, Coos Bay, Medford, Grants Pass, and many places throughout the Willamette Valley. These travels have taught me many things, but perhaps most important is that the notion of 2 Oregons is silly. In many ways, all of Oregon's communities are inextricably linked. We share many common issues: schools, roads, jobs, growth, quality of life. We have a common governor, legislature, tax structure, and set of statutes. At the same time, we have many differences. Access to markets, technology, capital, and transportation are very different in the regions of this state that are distant from this metropolitan area. We also see environmental regulations and statewide ballot measures through a very different set of filters. In 1998, the Portland metropolitan area enjoyed average wages per worker of about $31,000. Our Willamette Valley cousin, Benton County, topped this with average per worker wages of $32,000. Compare this with Central Oregon's Deschutes County at $25,000, Southern Oregon's Jackson County at $24,000, or Eastern Oregon's Grant and Union counties at $23,000, or with Wheeler County at just $18,000. In 1998, statewide unemployment was 5.6%. In urban areas, it was 5%. In rural areas, 8.4%. And in Grant County, the state's highest unemployment stood at 13.6%. And the wage gap between the Portland region and the rest of the state is growing. In 1979, the average wage in the Portland metro area was about 13% higher than the rest of the state. By 1998, the gap had grown to 32%. Today, the economy of the Portland metropolitan region is larger than the rest of Oregon's 31 counties combined. These similarities and differences don't say 2 Oregons to me. They say 1 Oregon and many Oregons. We are different, but a livable future requires that we work together. To successfully work together, we must better understand each other. Understanding can begin with listening. In my travels about the state, I've noticed that the Portland area talks better than it listens. Non-metro Oregonians think nothing of coming to meetings, the theater, or even to dinner in Portland. Many Portlanders can't imagine doing the reverse. I once overheard one of my own urban board members say that he'd recently been to one of our meetings in Baker City, for God's sake. Well, today, we'll listen. We're fortunate to have with us 3 public officials who are on the front lines of making policy and growing a livable future in 3 different regions of our state. State Senator Neil Bryant from Bend, Jackson County Commissioner Sue Kupillas from near Eagle Point, and Baker County Commissioner Brian Cole from Baker City. Each will take a few minutes to share their view of Oregon's future. Then I will ask them each to comment on a couple of issues that are currently in the news before we open the floor to your questions. Neil Bryant is a senior partner in the law firm of Bryant, Loveland, and Jarvis in Bend. He was elected to the Oregon State Senate in 1992, and since 1995 has chaired the Judiciary Committee. He has served on the committees of Revenue, Ways and Means, Human Resources, Rules and Elections, Legislative Council, Water and Land Use, Business and Labor, and the Emergency Board. He's also active in the National Council of State Legislatures and many Bend civic organizations. Senator Bryant graduated from Pacific Lutheran University and received his law degree from Willamette University. Senator Bryant isn't sure that Portlanders trust the judgment of rural Oregonians and notes that rural Oregonians often wonder at Portlanders' behavior at the polls. Neil?
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for this invitation. When I heard the description of the 30-second question limitation for people who are here, I was thinking, is that the Dan Goldie rule? I saw Dan come in. When I explained to friends and staff that I was going to be invited to speak today and what the topic was, they responded that maybe the best evidence of the divide between the two Oregonians, or two Oregons, is the fact that the Portland City Club thinks that I'm from a rural part of the state. In fact, one of them responded, Neil, how are things down on the farm? I do acknowledge that Bend is a little different, and part of Deschutes County, we have a different economy and population, and we've done better economically than most of rural Oregon. But we still associate ourselves with Central and Eastern Oregon and not with the Willamette Valley and Portland. My senatorial district includes 4 counties, all of Deschutes, all of Jefferson, northern Klamath County, southern Wasco County, and the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. So it's a diverse group. And before I discuss the differences between rural and urban Oregon, I want to acknowledge that we benefit from urban Oregon, especially when it comes to taxes. You pay more taxes. It goes into the state general fund. It helps primarily our schools, but also many of the services that we need. In addition, I think there is a trickle-down economy. When Portland does well, the rest of the state improves, and we thank you for that. Also, Central Oregonians enjoy the cultural, historical, and sports activities that are in the Portland area. OMSI is an example, I think, of a wonderful group that travels the entire state, and the Oregon Historical Society is truly the Oregon Historical Society, not the Portland Historical Society. So I thank you for that. Central Oregonians recognize that we've changed dramatically in the past 30 years. Deschutes County has grown about 2/3. And in 1970, our industries were primarily wood products and agriculture and tourism. Today, our chief source of income is no longer wages, but transfer payments, profit sharing plans, Social Security, investments, followed by tourism, and then construction, agriculture, and wood products. That's a dramatic change. And I wonder if the senator from Central Oregon in 1970, if he were addressing you today, what comments he would have and how he would view then Governor Hatfield's statements about the danger of two Oregons. I'm also reminded of the statement that took place, I think it was about 1988, when we were trying to have one of the gubernatorial debates in Central Oregon. And then former Mayor Goldschmidt was heard saying, why we wanted in Bend, and he said, why go to Bend? It's the middle of nowhere. and the storm that created, because everyone in rural Oregon felt it applied to him. Well, the next day, the candidate was in Bend apologizing and realized he'd made a faux pas, and no one has made that statement running for statewide office since then. But he expressed a feeling that I think reflected what maybe was the attitude in the urban areas. But with this background, let me give you a few quick examples of how I believe urban Oregon is taking advantage of rural Oregon. The first one deals with land use. We have a sense that the people in the valley do not trust us to make good land use decisions regarding our private property. Deschutes County is composed of lands that are generally described as secondary lands. They're not prime farmland, they're not prime forest land. They have very poor quality of soil. Most of it does not have water. and we have a terrible growing season. And yet it's zoned, most of it, for exclusive farm or forest use. You can't do much with it. And that's very frustrating. When we attempt to change this, we're met with great resistance, not only from urban legislators, and usually the governor, but also urban environmental groups, such as Thousand Friends of Oregon. They do not recognize our distinctive differences, which makes this worse is that urban Oregon wants to preserve Central Oregon to be their pristine recreational area. And we want you to come and enjoy Central Oregon. But we need to change too. And 80% of Deschutes County is owned by the federal government. So you can't really do much with that particular part of it. So what I would hope is that we can develop a more flexible attitude and give more local discretion in the land use area. I'm not saying we should repeal LCDC. We need good planning. And we do good planning. Believe me, in Central Oregon, environmentalists and conservationists are well represented when we have these heated discussions about whether or not Bend should grow anymore. And but when it moves on from those local decisions, and I think they're careful, well thought out decisions, we feel second guessed by state agencies that are dominated by people from the urban areas and by special interest groups. And what we've created in Oregon then is a very complicated and expensive land use system that only the rich can afford. The second point is on health care. One of the biggest myths, I think, of all time is that health care costs less than rural areas. That's simply not true. It probably costs more. And yet the state of Oregon and the federal government pay rural doctors 12% less for providing the same services. Now, to do a better job of that, of course, that means that we have to take a little of that money that goes to urban Oregon in the healthcare area and ship it to rural Oregon. That's tough to do. But we have more poverty and we have more senior citizens in rural Oregon. A final point, and probably the biggest risk that I see in the future, deals with our initiative process. Central and Eastern Oregon compose about 60% of the state geographically, but we only have 6% of the population. Petition gatherers do not come to Central Oregon anymore or rural Oregon. Instead, they go to 3 malls in the Portland area. They go to Lloyd Center, Washington Square, and Clackamas Town Center. And currently there's over 150 petitions with the Secretary of State out that can gather signatures. 60% of these are constitutional amendments, not statutory changes. And I know you know the difference because of the study group that you had on initiatives. But probably only 30 of these will get enough signatures to make the November ballot. But the fate of those will rest with urban Oregon, not with rural, both in their capacity to gather the signatures and then to pass it at the ballot. And the media campaigns will be largely done here. In 1995, the legislature, when it became clear that it was constitutionally protected to have paid petition gatherers, set out a measure, and it was Measure 24, and it said that you have to gather some of your signatures in each of the congressional districts. So if you had to gather 75,000 signatures, 15,000 would have to come from Central, Eastern, Southern Oregon, which is Craig Walden's congressional district. I thought it was a reasonable request. It was overwhelmingly passed in the rural counties, but it failed in the Tri-County area because that's where they ran the campaign, and one of the slogans was, why let Central Oregon or Eastern Oregon or rural Oregon veto our good ideas? And of course, that's not what would have happened at all, but it would have required those people to go to rural Oregon and try and get signatures and explain their measure. And wasn't that the purpose of the initiative process? In 1990, Measure 5 passed. Again, a constitutional amendment, property tax limitation, not only on local government, but on schools. And at that time, only 29% of the funding for K through 12 came from the general fund of the state. The rest came from local property taxes. Now that's shifted. We provide, we being the state of Oregon, more than 70% of the funding for K through 12. And this took power away from local voters, property owners, from school boards. And it's changed dramatically, and we're still going through the evolution of what that means. But that failed in most rural counties. We recognized that we didn't want to lose that power and shift it to Salem, and Salem wasn't looking for that power. But it passed overwhelmingly in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County. That's why we have Measure 5. In fact, it only passed in 14 counties out of 36 in the state. In 1994, Oregon's voted on a ban for hunting bear and cougar with dogs. Again, this was a very close election. The initiative failed overwhelmingly in the rural counties, but it passed by 70,000 votes in Multnomah County, 23,000 in Washington County, and 17,000 in Clackamas County. I submit those yes votes did not consider the impact it would have on rural Oregon. You don't have many cougar in downtown Bend, but we sure do in Central Oregon, and they're growing. I have more and more reports, not only from hunters, but farmers, ranchers, and just homeowners, that they're seeing signs of cougars in their backyard. We have a jogger, a friend who lives in Tumalo, just outside of Bend, who now carries a handgun because of the trails that she sees that cougars are walking on her property. Bow hunters who can't carry guns when they bow hunt are going to ask the legislature for permission to carry a handgun because they feel they're being tracked by cougars as they go do their bow hunting. At some point, not only livestock or cats and dogs are going to die, which they are, but some humans are going to be attacked. But that is an initiative that I don't think who people voted yes had any consideration of rural Oregon. In the legislature, when we have an issue that doesn't really affect you or our district, we go to the senator or representative who's most affected by it, and we try and give deference to their opinion. And it's not a partisan thing. It's something, this is going to happen in your backyard, what's the best decision for you? And as you approach these initiatives, and I would ask that you have that same consideration to think about the impact it has on us. It'll get worse after the census. I think it'll confirm then that for the first time in Oregon, a majority of the population will live within an urban area, and that hasn't happened before. So I don't think it's going to get any better. I think it's going to get worse. Thank you.
Sue Kupillas was elected to the Jackson County Board of Commissioners in 1988. She's the board's liaison to county agencies such as Planning and Development, Urban Renewal, Health and Human Services, the Library, and the Extension Service. She's active on a long list of professional and government boards and committees locally, regionally, and statewide. She's currently the chair of the Oregon Rural Development Council. Commissioner Kupillas is a graduate of the University of Idaho. She notes that rural Oregon distrusts urban Oregon on issues such as natural resources and water, and that rural communities make a substantial contribution to Portland's economy and quality of life. Sue?
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, members of the Portland City Club, for inviting us to come here today. This is a great opportunity. Took me a long time to boil this down into a few sentences because I had a lot I wanted to say, but I'll try and get it in a short time. We do export many of our good ideas, our manufactured products, and our young people to Portland. My daughter's sitting here in the front row. We think it's a good thing that you've invited us here today so we can talk a little bit about who we are and how we can connect. First, let me tell you about Jackson County. Jackson County is located in the Rogue Valley along I-5 on the California border. We have 2,800 square miles of land base, 80% in forests, and about a very small percentage of that, over 1 million acres, 27,000 acres in farmland. The rest is mixed-use oak savannas, agate desert, and urbanized areas. We have 11 towns, incorporated cities, with 11 unincorporated rural communities. Medford's the largest, with around 70,000 people, and you know that for Harry and David's and the mail-order pears. And Ashland, many of you know, is around 19,500 people, and it's very well known for the world-class Shakespeare Theater. From our rural timber towns of Butte Falls and Prospect to our liberal university theater town of Ashland, we have a wide diversity of cultures. 15% of our population in the county is Hispanic. Our climate is arid, 14 to 19 inches of rainfall a year compared with Portland's 37 inches. We're in a bowl surrounded by the Cascades and the Siskiyou Mountains, which also means that we live where ecosystems collide, making our geology, our groundwater, and air quality issues very, very complex. We have more mixed-use federal and private lands than any other county. That makes our land use system very complex. A picture's worth 1,000 words, so I have asked my daughter to show you a picture of Jackson County, and I think this will tell. I said she had to walk around the room and show this, but I guess she can just hold it up. But I think you get it when you see this county, that we're mountains and forests, and very little area along the Rogue River and along Bear Creek. Our economy is diverse, including 2 major medical systems. That's good, Liz. Did everybody see that? Can you see that? She does a good job, doesn't she? Thank you so much. Our economy is diverse, including 2 major medical systems, wood products industry, agriculture, of course our famous pears, cattle and hay, and an emerging wine grape industry, retail and manufacturing. The percentage of retirees in Jackson County, the same as Bend, is higher than the rest of the state. We have a milder climate, and part of it is our proximity to California. And that, of course, adds to our service industry in Jackson County. What makes us unique is that Jackson County is large enough to have some resources to improve our quality of life. We have community leaders collaborating, not competing, and we have a rich diversity of cultures that makes our regional discussions pretty lively. We also have a healthy tourism industry, recreational opportunities, hunting, boating, fishing on the rivers and lakes, hiking, climbing, Shakespeare and Brit, music festival, and tours of historic Jacksonville. Of course, those are all seasonal jobs. We think we have it all in this small area without congestion and without the big city problems. However, there's more to the story. We face the challenges as people in the surrounding states discover our area, and by the year 2050, it looks like we'll double in population growth and have around 300,000 people living there. We're doing some things to meet those challenges, and we have several collaborative efforts going on that I think we lead in the state. We have the Civic League has conducted the Healthy and Sustainable Communities Project, creating our blueprint for the future. And Jeff Triance was quoted as saying that we probably have done the most comprehensive effort in this direction of anybody in the state, and that our region really cares about our future. Another collaborative citizen effort is in the area of land use, where our region, a regional land use planning project, has been going on for several years. And we're looking at where we are after 30 years of implementing Senate Bill 100, and then where we want to be in the future. We have digitized mapping systems that have layers of information to tell the story of where we are. And then what we're doing is arming ourselves to attack the most serious growth issues that we have, decide the future we want, and then see if we can get the state to go along with what we want. The problem is, if we continue on the path we're on today under the current land use planning system, we will build over all of our 27,000 acres of good farmland, because all of that farmland surrounds our cities. So this land use planning system that was designed, and we believe in zoning in all the different areas in Oregon, we absolutely believe in it, but it was designed for the Willamette Valley, and it doesn't work in Southern Oregon. So we must be able to work outside the system, and we're trying to figure out how we can work with the system and yet design a system that works in Southern Oregon. Another collaborative project we have that was masterminded by Mark Prevost of the Rogue Valley Council of Governments is the Salmon Recovery Plan, which was the first plan of its kind in the whole state of Oregon, where it combines private and public lands. It was a collaborative, locally driven, science-based, and based on the premise that it's most important to gain improvements through incentives rather than punishment. Our watershed groups need state and federal help to help them progress through the next steps. And this is logical because, of course, it's state and federal mandates that have actually generated this huge effort. And we believe in it, but still, it's something that takes a lot of time and a lot of money. In a very different area, Health and Human Services in Jackson County, we're a leader in development of integrated human services with the White City Integrated Service Center, where we have 19 agencies working together. This is the first one stop in the state and continues to be a leading model of the 40-some integrated centers around the state today. As a result of this collaborative effort, Rebecca Orff, a judge, has developed the judicial system that works with families as a whole also. And so one judge handles the entire family for all of the offenses. They work with the integrated centers to design remedies to work with and rehabilitate families. We want to expand this integrated centers countywide with the state's help. These are partnerships that work. They're community-based, they're collaborative, they're research-based. What makes them work is that the decision-making and the money ends up at the local level. The state's moving toward that with the community solutions teams. And this is going to be an interesting process to watch. We have done this successfully at a local level. What's going to make, and at a state level, they're getting together transportation and ODOT and LCDC and all the different state agencies to work with local communities. What's going to be interesting is that it has been a trickle-down system in the past. And what's going to be interesting is seeing if the state can change the culture to become a support system for the community efforts. We think to make it work, to truly empower these communities, the decision-making and the money must be at the local level on the front lines where the problems are. This is a huge culture change, and it'll be interesting to see. In some areas it's worked well. Actually, we have a collaboration in Jackson County that we're still experimenting with, and that's in our Public Works Department, where we put state and local government together, and it's been several years, and that, for a whole bunch of reasons, has been far more difficult to put together. So sometimes those hierarchical things aren't so easy to change. With the successful collaborative efforts with the state, economic development and transportation funding has been changing, and we are starting to see a whole change in that culture. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about our forest and agriculture issues in our rural area. Rural Oregon is rich in history and culture, providing connection with our pioneer roots. Our rural area provides the products we all need and use, products that are exported from the rural area to the urban area. Rural Oregon provides working landscapes that we all love to see, which are visually pleasing and satisfy our sense of self-sufficiency, that we actually produce some of what we use. The rural areas also give us a place to renew mentally through recreation, which I think that's true in Deschutes County and as well as in Jackson County. Watersheds in rural areas also provide clean natural water supply and oxygen from the trees in the forest. We also provide a place to raise children who have a direct connection with the land, the seasons, and the entire environment. I think that this is how we preserve our genetic connection with the land, is to actually raise people out there who have to interact with it. I want to focus now, I wanted you to just get the setting of why rural Oregon is so important to even in the urban areas, even today. I want to focus now on the forest. It's important to us because 80% of our county is forested. 50% of Oregon is in forest. Oregon is unique in several ways as it pertains to forests. We have skills, experience, and a deep intelligence about our environment. We have the best research institution in the world for forestry research, and that's Oregon State University. That institution also has a system for getting the newest research information on the ground where it makes a difference in management practices. This education changes the way we do things. Then we also have a very intelligent, educated rural population who seeks out newer, better management techniques, willing and eager to absorb and implement new research-based ideas. Nowhere is that more apparent than it is in Southern Oregon, where we have led the effort on a state and national level in environmental stewardship, implementing the latest research. And one thing is the salmon recovery plan. Another is the Applegate Partnership, which is a model of local collaborative forest management, well known nationally. It produces forest products, research, publications, actions, and a community working together. The decisions, while collaborative, are also linked with the best scientific research, as I said. Local, collaborative, science-based solutions generated by the community at the level closest to the action. I think you're beginning to get the idea. Let me talk about some of the threats, because this is where the Portland area comes in. One of the threats to applying best management practices in our forests is a powerful, well-funded industry that knows how to do bumper sticker environmental politics and that has clever, well-funded lawyers who know about finding loopholes to file lawsuits. Local collaborative research-based is not in their vocabulary. Another threat is urban media supporting the same bumper sticker environmental politics. The sound bites make good copy for newspapers, but bad management in the forests. Andy Kerr has risen to fame in the Oregonian. Another problem that you can help us with is the administration of Washington, D.C. is handing out edicts on forests that don't recognize local collaborative efforts. The process is politically driven, not driven by experience and science. In Oregon, Secretary Babbitt is here today to take another look. I met with him this morning. He's looking at 2 national monuments. We do not need the top-down edicts that cut out local discussions and decisions in both the Steens Mountain and in the Soda Mountain area. We have local efforts that are looking at all of the issues and all of the problems, and we don't need somebody who is making a political decision coming and telling us what to do. We already heard about the initiative petition. I had a whole section on that. We actually, I guess the solution is to ask you to be well educated on the issues and to take advantage of the wonderful resources that we have here in Oregon. Senate Bill 1608. Senator Ron Wyden, there was a big ad in the newspaper against him a week or 2 ago, against Senate Bill 1608, which promises to provide stable funding for counties in rural Oregon. Senator Wyden understands the connection between rural communities and our forest is natural and desirable. And he's getting penalized from that, for that position, supporting us in rural Oregon by big ads in the Oregonian. So, I don't know, from our viewpoint, there's kind of a NIMBY syndrome that says don't cut anything in our own backyard. We don't want to harvest any trees in Oregon. Yet we're building houses 2 times the size that we have a generation ago, and we're having families half the size. If we are intellectually honest about this, we will produce some of the building materials here in our own rural communities where we have the trees, we have the environmental protections, and where we need the jobs in the economy. Like the Applegate Partnership, we know how to do this. We have the solutions here, and I guess one of the things I see that Oregon is in a position to be a world leader in fiber and environmental protections. With OSU, our research center, and Department of Forestry, and with the State Forester Jim Brown and the Department of Forestry, where we lead on issues of forestry in the nation. I guess what we can ask of you is that you all do your homework on forestry issues, that you learn about the Research and Extension Experiment Station, and that you as Portlanders are educated, but we need to be more and more educated on some of these rural issues. And again, I want to thank you so much for allowing us to come today and to talk about a few of the issues that are important to us and to listen to us. And I hope that this changes the way that you view us in the future. Thank you.
Brian Cole was elected to the Baker County Board of Commissioners in 1998. A native of Longview, Washington, he graduated from Oregon State University and received a Master's of Management from Willamette University. Commissioner Cole moved to Baker City in 1987 to accept the position of Economic Development Director for Baker City and Baker County. Not coincidentally to anybody that knows him, this coincided with the beginning of Oregon's most impressive rural community comeback. Baker City has become synonymous with economic development, quality of life, and Main Street revival. Governors, state officials, foundation executives, and entrepreneurs from across the state agree Brian Cole just doesn't acknowledge no as an acceptable or even possible answer. Before his election, Commissioner Cole spent 5 years as a regional development officer with the Oregon Economic Development Department. He sees rural and urban partnerships as a path to one Oregon. Brian?
I too would like to thank the City Club for this opportunity. For me, it's an opportunity, the second time I've been able to attend the City Club, and it was 9 years ago at the end of Neil Goldschmidt's term as governor, that he was basically telling the story after his 4 years in service of the Oregon comeback. And he put a special multimedia program together that particular day that really showcased the victories around the state, the individuals and the communities that best captured the spirit of the Oregon comeback. And we were very, very honored that he selected Baker City and Baker County as the area in the state that best captured that spirit. Neil Goldschmidt, for me, is my inspiration for public service, and the connections that he was able to make as this kind of city slicker from Portland rolling into a rural community like Baker City and Baker County and connecting in a way that we had never been connected with before. To me, serves as a model of how rural and urban Oregon have great possibilities of connecting again and again. He put together a program called Regional Strategies. It was basically a program that in his mind was the invitation basically for communities and counties and regions to define where they wanted to go and ask state government to be their partner there. And it was that message basically is the message that I share with you today, which is that if there's 4 words that sum up the message I'm going to share with you, is that it's up to us there. And it's up to us, to me, actually has 2 meanings. And the first meaning has to do with the fact that if we're going to develop a good interdependent relationship between rural and urban Oregon, the it's up to us part applies specifically to rural Oregon and its ability to define its own future there. We were a county back in the early 80s that basically had hit economic bottom. We had, we felt like the 340 miles between Baker City and Salem felt like infinity. The idea that we could actually make a difference on the scene at the federal level was just impossible to think about. We have discovered in Baker County that we couldn't just sit around and complain and hope that somebody was going to show up and save us there. We needed to define our future and make it happen. And in fact, that is, I think, the challenge for all cities, all counties, all regions, is to first to come to the acknowledgement that it's not just a matter of holding out the hand and waiting for the lottery funds to come from Salem or the business investment to happen. It's up to each of us. It's up to us as individuals, as counties, as regions to make that happen. The second meaning of it's up to us is the relationship that we have between rural and urban. And I'll close a little bit later on with a kind of a specific challenge on how we can work together to make things happen in the state. One of my favorite authors is Stephen Covey, and one of my favorite books is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he puts together a model that talks about dependence, independence, and interdependence. And I think he's speaking generally about individuals when he's thinking about this particular model, but he's basically recognizing that the goal really is interdependence, where we create win-win solutions by working together. But we can't get there if we are simply dependent. We individually, or we as communities or regions, have to create that sense of independence, that sense that Baker County created in the late 1980s, and then we can work together. Had an opportunity over the last week to take a look at a couple of the addresses that were before you this year. And the first one I had a chance to do was to take a look at the tape of Mike Burton's presentation back on January 7. And he reminds the urban area of the incredible incredible wealth, incredible growth that the Portland area, the Willamette Valley, has seen in the 1990s, and the fact that actually in 1997 it had the fastest growth of any state in the nation there. I've had an opportunity as a former regional development officer working for the state to be around a table where a lot of that growth opportunity was discussed, and hopefully the state helped to make that happen in the mid-1990s. And basically, though, Mike Burton also then talked about not just the great growth, but the great problems that everybody in the urban area is seeing. The basic issue is really not one of creating growth, but one of maintaining livability. And what can we put in place to maintain that livability? I think there's great opportunities. I'm going to kind of throw out an opportunity at the end of this to create a win-win situation between urban Oregon, which is seeing more growth than it can probably sustain, and many parts of rural Oregon, which are not seeing enough growth to keep the doors open. Governor Kitzhaber, of course, talked about another angle of this wealth and of this great time of opportunity, and that is one of the greatest threats that I think we see as a state also and as a nation, and that is complacency right now. Things are going along so good that we don't have to work at it. Now, that's not true in many parts of Baker County, and that's not true in many parts of rural Oregon, but we do have a situation right now where things are cooking along so well that we've become complacent. Fortunately, I think there is a new vehicle in place. It was approved by the legislature, Senator Bryant and others, and I, for one, think that it's time to take advantage of that. Earlier, I spoke about regional strategies, and regional strategies, in the mind of Neil Goldschmidt, was to basically say, you guys get your act together and come to the state with your plans, and we'll be a partner. Unfortunately, I don't think the state got it. The rest of the state basically saw it as a big pot of money. And they did their local planning. They were eligible for fairly large sums of regional strategies monies. They did the plan, they called for projects, and they spent the money. In some cases, and we happen to be one of those cases, I think the money was spent strategically, but in many cases, there was no real connection between the plan and the money there. What I think has happened through this next evolution of legislation here is that we've now created not what are called regional strategies, but what are called regional partnerships. And I think Sue made some reference to this. And basically the regional partnerships are saying, yeah, you do the work, you do the strategic plan, you'll get the money, but the real goal is the relationship between state government and your county or your region. And these regional partnerships are all about the establishment of a relationship between regions and between at least 5 state agencies that form the Community Solutions Team: economic and community development, environmental quality, transportation, housing, and land conservation and development. In the state's mind, those are the agencies that ought to connect with the agendas of the communities and the regions. One thing that Baker County believes in is that the state is right. It's not just about the money, it's about the relationship with the state to jointly identify mutual interests and then move those forward. We intend to partner, actually. We're going to partner with a county that is halfway between Baker County and Portland. It's Morrow County. You may know Boardman and Hefner, and there's 3 other incorporated cities there. And we're going to form a regional partnership around the recognition that it's not about the money, it's about the relationship with state agencies. And we have a lot of plans, a lot of projects that can only move forward to their fullest extent if we define our interests and those various state agencies heads identify their interests, and we actually put together an agreement that moves that forward. I think Baker County, in my mind anyway, is one of the most progressive rural counties in the state. And I'd like to just give you 2 quick reasons why I think so, and neither one of them have anything to do with Baker City. One of the most remote communities in Oregon, one that I doubt that too many people here have been to, is Unity. The population is under 200 in Unity, and they basically have been declining for years, declining to the point that they're actually about to lose their school system. And I don't know if you've ever been involved with a community that was about to lose its elementary school or its high school because it was shrinking, but that's about as bad as it gets there. Unity decided it's up to us, and the Burnt River School District basically took the action of identifying where it wanted to go, recognizing that the shift now with all the money being held by the state for schools is based upon a formula of more students, realized that their only way up, their only way to create quality programs was to increase the size of the student population. How do you do that? Well, they actually put together a very innovative arrangement with a foreign exchange program. They put together a boarding school, and they now have twice the student population. They've hired a new teacher, and the Burnt River School District was recognized in this most recent report card for schools as the finest small high school in the state of Oregon there, because they took charge of where they're going. The one other quick example of a community moving from dependence to independence has to do with the city of Halfway. Now, Halfway has been not only in the news recently, but my good friend, the mayor of Halfway, Dick Crow, was actually interviewed the other day by Katie Couric. You may have seen Katie and Dick Crow. It's actually quite a sight on TV there. And I've read some of the press locally in the Oregonian about that, and it almost looks as if a community has, if you'll pardon the term, prostituted itself in order to set its own course. And I just want to set the record straight that there is not a community that I know of its size, more than Halfway, Oregon, 52 miles off the freeway, that cares more about itself, cares more about its future, and has worked harder to set its own direction than Halfway, Oregon there. And so when they had the opportunity to form a relationship with half.com, they did so. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but most of the people in the community saw this as our opportunity to form a relationship with half.com. They're doing great right now, and I was at the half.com City Council in the City Hall just the other day. And the whole building is lined with boxes of new computers there because of the relationship they have with this internet-based company. I will close with the question that Abby and Jamie from Community Oregon expect me to close with. So what? Where do we go from here? I think it's nice to have these discussions, but I, for one, can't let it stop with just a discussion. We've got to figure out how we can make this mutual interest happen. I believe our opportunity it lies within that regional partnership concept that we just spoke about, the new partnership that's being formed between Baker and Morrow counties. And the challenge I'm going to lay before this group and people that you know of, maybe people that are in the radio audience as well, is let's think about establishing a relationship between the Portland business community, I'm looking at Robin right now, and maybe the Willamette Valley business community that recognizes that the real interest in the state of Oregon is to disperse the growth. The real interest in the state of Oregon is to see that some of these Oregon companies that are expanding can stay in Oregon, not contribute to the congestion of the Willamette Valley, but contribute to the need for jobs in the rural part of the state. What Baker and Morrow counties are going to do is we're going to form a Portland-based or Willamette Valley-based business recruitment advisory committee. If you think you have something to offer toward us in terms of the connections with the expanding Portland and Willamette Valley-based business area, we'd like to put together a group of maybe between 8 and 12 men and women that will commit their time to helping us identify those growth opportunities. We happen to be two counties that have our act together. We've got industrial parks, we've got staff, we've got promotional materials, we've got training programs, all of that. What we need are the connections with those of you that know what's happening in the community. So that's one thing I think we can do to work together. I thank you for the opportunity to be here and look forward with my colleagues to answering a few questions.
I've been assured that the Dan Goldie rule to limit it to 30 seconds doesn't apply to the board host, but I'll try to be short. All three of the panelists have suggested more flexibility on a local level in land use decisions, and yet based on some past excesses, many would assert that this isn't a good idea either for Central and Eastern Oregon, but for the Willamette Valley itself. What specific changes in the law would you recommend to give that local flexibility but still preserve the land use protections?
ahead.
Well, one suggestion in the last legislative session was to regionalize it so that maybe you had two LCDCs. You had one for the west side, recognizing the different climates, geography, soils, and you had one for the east side. That wasn't very popular with those who don't want to change any of the land use laws, and I don't think the governor supported it. And then it doesn't answer the question of what to do with Southern Oregon, because unfortunately for that solution, you have to draw another line then somewhere to say, okay, where do we regionalize our local planning? But I think that's one solution, and it has some merit, and it should be discussed.
Yeah, we've talked about regionalizing also our land use system. The other thing is, I guess what I would ask for is some honesty in the zoning. We have 350,000 acres zoned exclusive farm use and 27,000 acres that actually is farmland. And if we want open space, then we should have the ability to zone it open space and then figure out how to buy development rights or whatever. If it's in the public good, then the public should be willing to pay for it rather than just zone it out of the ability to do anything. So I would argue for some honesty in the system statewide, and maybe that's how we would change it in our region.
We completed a survey actually in 1988 and 1998 in Baker County about people's opinion about growth and people's opinion about the land use planning system. And I was a little surprised by the results. We actually have a very high majority of people in Baker County that do support Oregon's land use planning system, and I do as well. I think there are some areas around the fringes of land use planning, though, that are creating problems, and we do need to work toward those.
My name is Monroe Sweetland. I live halfway between Oregon City and Portland. So I have all kinds of problems as a result of this. But there's one subject that you didn't touch on in this, and I know that Sue Kupillas and Senator Bryant, at least those, I didn't know the man from Baker, but they have been real leaders in their areas. They're spokesmen for what they represent, and they certainly did a good job today. But I didn't hear anything about the Native Americans. In the years when I was in the state legislature, which is now 50 years ago in a sense, the American Indians, as we called them then, had no place in our state body politic, no member of the legislature, members of hardly anybody in the county courthouses. Now suddenly they are enormously important to our economy and in many other ways in which they can wreak a kind of vengeance for what happened to their ancestors in all these ways, including taxation, so forth. But they still aren't in general voting. Now I hope I'm wrong about some of this, and maybe you can. Are they participating in the decision? The recent new foothold that they have in our public power system in the state, of course, the gambling, economic activity, and all these other things bring them very much into the mainstream of Oregon life, and yet I think I'm right that they really do not participate in a substantial way in the decisions. They've got another government, and they live largely under tribal government, and that's my question. Will you comment on it, please?
I represent the Warm Springs, and they're a very wealthy tribe as far as natural resources are concerned, and a progressive tribe in what they do, but they generally do not vote in elections. Probably 10 to 15% of their members are registered to vote, and that's because primarily they're a sovereign nation, and there isn't much in the way of local politics or state politics that affect them. They spend a lot of time with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They spend a lot of time with their federal government. They have very good attorneys, and I talk to them all the time, and so they are represented in Salem through that, and Oregon does recognize them with a special commission. But on a local level, generally they're not active in politics and they don't vote.
Yeah. The only issues really that have come up with the Native Americans have been some land use issues where there are some artifacts and Indian burial grounds. But the rogue tribes of Indians were not real organized in the same sense that some of the other tribes were. So, and they were a nomadic tribal group that went along the Rogue River. So it's a little bit different situation that they're really not formed into any kind of organization as such.
I'm Ray Polani, a City Club member, and we've heard a lot about land use and some about unemployment and income disparity between Western Oregon and Eastern Oregon and so on. And something that comes to mind is the need for linking together the various parts of the state with alternative transportation. I'm thinking about the restoration of the Pioneer through Baker City. I'm thinking about the rail connection in Medford, between Medford, Grants Pass, and Ashland, and perhaps even California and north. And then again, bus service to Bend and Deschutes County and Burns and so on, Ontario and whatnot. The legislature in the last session miserly cut down the $14 million request for alternative funding to $10 million. How can we get more of that to address the problems?
Well, since the legislature was mentioned, maybe I should go first. It was reduced from 14 to 10, but it was still an increase from where it had been in the prior biennium. And part of that is just the demand on the general fund budgets. Do you want that money to go to schools? Do you want that money to go to health services? With the passage of Measure 11, we've are tripling our prison space. So it's always a question of where that money should go. And on the alternative education, it's heavily subsidized. It doesn't pay for itself, doesn't come close to paying for itself, especially in rural areas. And so there isn't a real good answer there of how to accomplish that. And plus, and I think it's particularly true in rural Oregon, although you see it on 217 and elsewhere, Oregonians still like their cars, and that's their preferred way of travel.